Very pleased to say, after a tiny bit of work with the file, we've got no scrunching. That's the B one. This one is similar, so I'm going to make a tiny little extra to show you what I did. I'm just going to literally run this gently in the slot. Now this is just sort of collapsing any rough bits into one. That B, it was like a little flat plateau, which is no good for, it was too wide for the B string for a start, so it needed a bit more, a bit of something for the B to sit in. Excuse me, I've got rosewood in my airways. Right, let's put this up on here. Yes. Hurrah. That's pleasing. A little tiny adjustment. That's that. Now, I'll take care of these a bit later on. What I'm going to do, let's just snap these off again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the opportunity now to mark the frets with marker pen, ready for the fret level, which I may do tomorrow now. We'll just have it prepped up. Yeah, just looking at the slots are a bit mucky, but that's quite normal for strings going back and forwards. The finger grease goes into the slots. It could be also graphite that Dominic's put in there, but I'm not sure. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the marker pen, and then I'm going to get all of these marked up. There's a good chance to have a look at the fingerboard as well, and also I get to have a close look at the frets to see if they've been worked before. Now these frets have got the little nibs on the end, and I don't want to work them that far, so I'm just going to stop short of that, which is anyway where the it's still within the, you know, well within the playing area. Interesting issue when you come to sand out, polish out. If you do any leveling with the thing with these nibs on the end, you have to be very careful to avoid the nibs on the end. Also, when you're refretting, you sometimes just have to accept you're going to lose the nibs anywho. So what's possibly going to be the way to do this one is, once we've done any leveling, will be to use an individual string fret protector and polish each fret individually with some fret rubbers. Now, it's not the normal way that I would go to do it, but I've got to obviously be careful to preserve the nibs. Let's just get a starting note. So just to remind you, if you ever come to, well, when you come to restring this, it's worth bearing in mind that tuning stability is caused by two things. Firstly, equal measure, condition of your nut slots, so they've got to be friction free, because even the tiniest bit of friction will upset tuning. And the second part of the deal is the amount of unreleased slack in your strings. Excuse me, I've been radiusing fingerboards today. Yeah, so the condition of the nut slots, no friction, and the amount, or the getting rid of all the slack in your strings. If you can do those two things, you'll get perfect tuning stability. And it's amazing how hard you have to work to get rid of all the slack, and we'll see that a bit later on as we carry on filming all of this all the way through. So here are my kind of nut adjustment files, all of which can go away for now because I don't need them at the moment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go and cough somewhere else. I'm going to call time on this bit. I've got it kind of measurements taken. I know what's what. I know where I'm going. I know what I'm not doing, and I'm going to come back ready to do the fret leveling tomorrow. And I'm going to, when the camera's off just now, I'm going to prep the leveling beam, or my banana fret leveling banana beam as I like to call it. I'm going to prep it with new paper because it's kind of done a lot of work and it's time to give it some new grit, 400 grit paper. I've just adjusted these, so these will need to be tweaked slightly again anyway. I'm looking at, there's quite a heavy brake angle over the back here. I mean, it's factory setting, so I'm not gonna adjust it, but it's no problem being a tight angle. It changes the amount of pressure on the string if you were to raise it up a bit. Obviously it comes to a point where if you raise it up too far, the string kind of bypasses or doesn't have enough pressure on the saddle, the bridge saddle or the apex of each saddle, and it won't ring out properly. So it needs some pressure. I think realistically it can be anywhere from like 5 degrees to about 30, 45, something like that. It's quite flexible. Some people swear by it changing the feel of it if they change it around. I've not really been able to discern much of a change. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to go away and have a look at, see what the ingenious ways of stopping the rattle and the bridge springs are. When I took that out, did I even see any springs? No, I didn't. That's why it rattles. There are no springs. It's a springless version. Good with a nut, ready to fret level. We know what we're aiming for, and we know once we I'll show you now, once we get going with the leveling, I've got high E bends on the 11th, 12th, 13th and 14th fret, and there's a very slight choke, or more accurately what I would call probably call a zing, kind of a nearly on its way to choking. It sort of cuts the note off a little bit. So there's all our settings on there. All of those are good. That's good, and we just want to make an improvement in that, and that's a very minor thing. I'm assuming, I don't know, somebody else who's Gibson experienced will know if these types of SGs go through the so-called plec machine, and that's cool if they do. And I'm not here to kind of criticize it or say it's a good or a bad thing. I think what will be interesting to note is to see whether or not with a very gentle extra little bit of leveling with this method I use, to hear whether those zingings, or we're just beginning to choke out on the big bends here, whether we actually hear those disappearing or not. Now, what I like about my method is that you can hear them disappearing, and I think that's a great thing. So off camera, I'll do a bit of research on what I'm going to do to stop these rattling. I'll do a little bit of looking in here to see what I can fit in the way of lead in there, and prepare my banana fret leveling beam for tomorrow. Okay, see you then. Well, this says it's got loads of battery, so we'll chance it for now. So here is my chunk of lead. It's not perfectly permanently stuck, so it'll only kind of hold it in place while the lid's closed, if you get what I mean. Anyway, the point being is that originally the orange drops were on top of there, so I've kind of moved them over, obviously severed the connection there and remade it there. And I've extended this one so I can fit it down in there. This is a bit of a lump that's constrained the size of the piece a little bit, but I've taken a layer of lead off to just accommodate that. Double layer of insulation, we've got Gorilla Tape, and we've got whatever that other stuff is, electrical tape. So now I'm going to plate that back in there, and it fits beautifully. And now what I'm going to do is refit you to the safe place up here. Beep, 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 beep. Hello, there we are. And so now I'm going to replace these. With this closed, it will stay in place. Anyway, there's practically no room. Of course, if it does come loose, then you might want to add a layer of double-sided tape. I could have done 3M pads. Let's have a see. The 3M pads, they're a bit thick, and I wouldn't want this bulging, so I'm kind of, I don't actually think once this is closed that the insert could move anywhere anyway, so that's pretty good going. Okay, so we now have an extra 300 grams down at this end of the guitar, which is amazing. Alright, now what I've done is, just for this bit of the video, because I'm too hot and sweaty to video all of this really, so I'll keep it to the minimums. Not that I have any idea when I'll ever get this uploaded. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do very careful fret leveling on this. Now I'm going to do it exactly the way I do with any other guitar. You know, the fact that it's a Gibson is neither here nor there for precision's sake. The only thing I'm going to be careful to do is not roll off the end and catch these, what do you call them? Nibs things. Okay, freshly papered truss rod. So we do the same thing as normal. We go for the, oh, there's my phone. We go for the calibrate the thingy. Richard says of his EKO neck refretting, he says it's like watching your own open heart surgery. Oh. Right, so what am I saying? Oh yes, yeah. So we're going to aim to give this the very, very slightest leveling, because we want to free up what we know to be, what did we say? Oh, it's 11, 12, 13, 14, I got them wrong. 12, 13, there's a little cluster here that are choking out. Now the thing about this is that we won't expect any leveling to have any effect on the E and the B track. It's when it comes to the G track that we'll be leveling it anyway, but the difference we'll hear is when we come to the G track, which is where the string is kind of hitting, is where the E string is hitting when it bends, due to basically the geometry of the whole thing. Now, just to keep people happy, somebody said, I don't like the idea of strings resting against this edge of the finish down here, so I'm just going to literally put a lump of Gorilla Tape on either side here, so that any strings that I pop off whilst doing this business will clang against this tape and not against any paintwork. It was a good heads up from a viewer on YouTube, which I've never had any problems with it, but it seemed to bother him a lot, and I thought, well, what's the big deal? A couple of pieces of tape. Now this is what he was worried about, so that when I take the string off here and put it down there, he was worried about it hitting the paintwork there. That now is alleviated, that fear, and here we go. Brand new, whatchamacallit, paper, and you'll hear it working straight away. I have to obviously use it a lot less thingily than I would if it was a lot older. So it's 400 grit, so it's cutting very slowly and carefully. And just looking at the pattern of cutting, it's cutting this lot here a little bit. So this is showing up as a little cluster of high frets just about here, and it's not to do with the sort of standard Les Paul congestion down here. It's just a chance thing, I guess, on this guitar. So we'll replace the string, and the most important thing, of course, is we need to make sure that it plays, every note plays, which we know all these do. It's the bend that's going to be the issue. But so we take off the B string, drop that over the edge too, use the spreader bar, and we're going to just, again, this is pretty much under gravity. We're letting the curve of this truss rod work on this slightly curved neck. So it's the curve of the neck that we're using against the frets. And again, we sort of would, at this point, expect to see some cutting, and we're seeing some cutting there particularly. Everywhere else there's a couple of low frets here by the look of it, which is quite common. You get that. Again, I'm keeping this to a very minimal amount of thingying, leveling, and then we check out. How annoying. God, that would drive me mad. Anyway, we're going to get some lacquer on the end of there. A little bit of lacquer, but what we'll do is we'll figure out how best to put it. In fact, what I'll do is I'll set the intonation right at the end. It'd be better if we took the bridge off and put the lacquer on to stop it, but we need to stop it moving, so it's going to have to, it really needs to be, it depends which bit's moving. It's hard to know. We want to stop the whole thing vibrating, so theoretically where the screw goes into the block would be good, but I don't want to soak it with tons of stuff. Next thing we do, we're going to recalibrate for the G track. And then again, this is pretty much spot on already, which is good. Again, with everything after the E, you don't have to take the string off the side. So this really is to protect the E's when we're doing the E's. Now this is the bit where I'm really looking to see or hear the improvement. Okay, so this is where we want it to do some real work. Not a lot anyway. This is very, very minor, the amount of leveling that's going on here. But it's this fret here. It's a particular problem. So it's just. Now, you know, as I mentioned before, this is by no means a criticism or comment even on the whole business of, I'm looking for something, I'm looking for a brush actually, here's one. It's not a comment on whatever method they use. Well, one of the things that I've learned over time is that the compression of a neck, and that's the wrong string, no wonder that's struggling. The compression on the neck, ow, when the strings are on, it not only curves the neck upwards as you imagine, but it also squeezes it this way, which I actually not sure, in fact I'm pretty certain that the Plec method doesn't do, and I think it has a very small amount of, it creates a small difference in how the neck sits and therefore how the individual frets sit. Okay, so now, okay, that's across into the, over the G, better than it was. Now as we go into the D track, we're just getting a little bit of zizz there, but it's pretty much cleared up. So that's how little we need. I'm going to do the D track and then I'm going to redo or retry the bends so that we can hear how much it's cleaned it up, or the limits to what's possible really. And I don't think it's going to be, I think you'll hear it get across that D. By the time, but you've got to remember that by the time we go over the G and back into the D bit, we're going downhill on the opposite side of this curve here, which means the string is going uphill and then downhill, which means there's no clearance at all. So if you're bending across onto the D and you're getting, if you're bending a high E across onto the D track over here, you've gone up the hill, you've lost, you've got a decreasing clearance because of the lower fixed point of the bridge. Then it goes down the other side, and you're losing even more clearance, if there is any, down to the bridge. So there is a point where if you're bending past the G track, you're obliged to increase your playing action if you want to bend across on, if you're trying to do it on such a low action, it physically becomes impossible. It's just the geometry of going uphill and downhill. There's no way around it. There's no amount of leveling that will give you back that. It's to do with the lowness of the action, the flatness of the neck, and the farness, the amount distance you're trying to bend. So not bad. Just still a little creak on that E saddle. I'm going to have to just recheck the notch on that. I didn't do it as much as this one. I did a little bit more on this notch. In fact, that I'm going to have to do a little bit on here. Problem is, you see, is doing anything with these saddles has just fractionally changes the height of them. But this one, you either replace the saddle altogether with a better cut one from the start, or you just have to accept the fractionally lower height. In fact, it would actually be better if I take this E down a tiny fraction just to balance it with the B, because the B's had to be lowered. I mean, we're talking 20th of a millimetre or something, but it's still enough to see from this angle anyway. Hear it creak? It's this badly cut saddle. It's pretty good actually. Okay, now I'm going to continue and just do a little bit on the rest of these, just as a kind of consistency thing, but they don't really, there's nothing apart from the bridge buzzing, there's nothing really that wrong with the frets here. So it's just a kind of uniformity that I'm just going to run this over here. And we'll keep it quick and just make a little run up there. So basically when doing these tracks, I'm sort of connecting them all up. So there's a sort of continuity, something like that. So there's not like, it's a smooth analog curve more than anything, if you get what I'm meaning. It's very common for the radius to change a little bit as you go, so that you have to make, that's why I recalibrate, because often I'll make small adjustments to the beam, to the curvature on the beam. So I guess a weird thing to say is that the curve can change on this side of this curve. So the relief curve can change at different parts of the radius curve. Sounds like a big mouthful. Okay, so that's all the leveling I'm going to do. It's freed up those zizzes, which was the target. It's helped me identify. We've still got a problem with the saddle on the E string. The thing is with this is, if it's a new guitar, you'd be within your rights if you wanted to expect a replacement saddle, two saddles, the E and the B, but then, you know, it depends. I don't know how these manufacturers work. If I've done something to alleviate it, they call, you know, do they refuse to replace it, but or do they take your word for it that, you know, I'm doing this work because there is a problem with it. I don't know how Gibson works. I would hope that they had the decency to take one's word for it, that we've had to do this work because of. Okay, so I'm going to lower this. Ooh, you can hear it ping as it goes backwards through this gritty slot. Now I made myself a lifter for that, which I'm going to have to remake one. I chucked it away. The lifter was a tiny thingamajig, one of them, squished like that, and I just used it to pull out the thing. Just I should keep it really, because there's no point just making another one every time. But where would I put it? Let's put it on there, right, like I'm going to remember. So with that in mind, I'm trying to improve or to stop. Now it's hard to tell, but if I get a blade in there, it's hard to even hold actually, this thing. In fact, it's nigh on impossible to hold these with my big fingers. You put your blade in there and you can almost straight away, you can feel there's movement in there you don't want. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and just use this to very, as carefully as possible really, just even out that slot. Now I won't know, like the B one, I won't know if it's improved it until I put it back in. And you know, the point is, you shouldn't have to do this on a Gibson. What I'm going to do is I'm going to slack this off a bit more. Yeah, you know, you'd want it right from the beginning, but it's I've took, and you saw a bit earlier, yesterday, sorry, I took the close-up pictures, and I've shared those with Dominic, just to kind of see in, hello fly, in close-up the state of the slot, or the size of the slot, particularly on the B. I mean, it was very visible on the B. It's like a canal. Okay, now what we've got here is the actual saddle is wobbling from side to side, and that's not great either. Sit down, boy. Okay. Now that, I have to say, that is the saddle moving now. I mean, that's partly connected with the looseness of the pieces, but I'm just going to hold that. No, we haven't got, I think that's cured the movement in the slot, but we've definitely got movement in the saddle block. We could probably improve that with a bit of, no, even a piece of a blob of cellulose paint or nitro or whatever that hardens. It will stop the thing buzzing, but it's not going to survive the sideways movement part. I mean, that's quite. See for the tension. A bit better, but blimey. Is it the screw that's doing the moving? Plastic thing. Yeah, the screw's doing the moving and it's taking the saddle with it. Not brilliant. The real issue is, does it show up? No. That's good. Small detail, very small detail, but not fantastic out of the factory. So, you know, I've said in the notes about this guitar, I've not got a lot of criticisms about it at all. It's unusually good. Well, Gibson, I'm hoping, you know, they've got better, and that's very good. However, it's a couple of little details that could be improved. Now, what am I looking for? I'm looking for the jack. There's a cheap one here. There's always one kicking around. Wish I had just a really short one for doing intonation. What I'm thinking of doing right now is just doing two things actually. I want to just make sure that my fabulous lead ballast business doesn't do anything to the electrics. So that's the first check I want to make. It's funny, isn't it? Not independent volumes. Why don't they do independent volumes? It's easy to rewire it, honestly. Anyway, that's good. The lead block has no negative effect on the whatchamacallits, gubbins, the works, the business. Right, now what I'm going to do is I want to intonate this. I want to check the intonation. Check the intonation. Because I want the intonation right before I take the strings off, and then I'll take the bridge off, then I'll apply a little bit of whatever that stuff is, nitro, to stop it thingying. Now these are old strings. Well, they're as old as this setup. I doubt they're very old at all, but so. So what I want to do is just check and tweak the intonation at this point. Although I'd rather do it on new strings, I'll do it now anyway, so that I can get it in line, and then we'll make the adjustment. The intonation thing, something I've been thinking about for a long time, and I've had sometimes you'll intonate a guitar and then people say, everything was great except the intonation was a bit off, but thanks, you know. And actually, so for example, if I play that G there, look, it's perfect, isn't it? Open G, fretted G, ready? Open G, fretted G. Oh no, the intonation's way out. Tweak, tweak, adjust, adjust. Right? You can see, very simple, crude demonstration, that the biggest variable in your intonation equation is how you fret a note, and everybody frets their notes differently. So the idea that I can set the intonation, the length, the precise length the string needs to be to counter or to accommodate your exact standard fretting pressure. The problems with that idea is that, first of all, you never fret the same twice, and no two people ever fret the same, including they themselves never fret. So it's a double layer of uncertainty, and the variable is hugely variable. That's the problem. So the only thing we can ever do is aim for an average. Now, according to that E is sharp, and I can see it is because it's too close, because I've taken it off and tweaked it. It's now too close. So I'm going to do the thing that tunematic bridges are famous for, is I'm going to make a backwards adjustment, and you can see that the access to the screw is just awful. One of my favourite whinges. I think that's pretty good. Okay, everything else is good. Pretty much as it came. The only thing I've altered in taking the saddles off and putting them back on was the that pattern, sorry, the E, high E. And let me just check the G, make sure it looks a little bit further back. No, it's on. That's good. Okay, so as a result of that, I would be happy now in a minute to do something to stick down these little saddle pieces, but like I say, I'm not going to do it on the guitar body because I'll be splashing nitro around. So where are we? We've done the weight, we've done the very fine fret leveling. Next thing we need to do, take the strings off. I'll keep these as a sacrificial set for another Gibson sized guitar. We'll take the strings off, then I will re-profile the frets, and then I will mask the neck off and polish them all out. Again, taking care to mask off the ends so I don't run the risk of getting sandpaper across the nibby bits, which we don't want. Once I've polished these out, then we'll be ready for a restring, and in the meantime I will put a little dab of whatever's the right stuff for here. I'll take off these little bits of tape now because they've served their purpose, and we'll be kind of heading in the homeward run. So, you know, you can see not a difficult setup, but one that's involved a bit of judgment. Do we take this nut and fit a adjustable one or not? As much as I like the adjustable one, but I'm just thinking about this. This is a guitar that some people get really uptight if you change it from original. Now, I know Dominic isn't that person. I'm not saying he is, but other people who look at it, play it, to whom he might want to sell it later, might end up being storing up a problem, and storing up a potential problem whilst not solving a problem, right? And I'll put these on when the nut is bad and there is tuning problems and it's clear that we're going to have to remove the nut anyway. But if that isn't the case, and in this case it wasn't, then we really do have to. I can hear it creaking through here. It's not good. I'm going to get some sandpaper in that slot as well. When this nut is good and we wouldn't be fixing any problem, then I just don't think it's a good investment. When the situation is different and there's a need to replace the nut, then it's a brilliant solution. So there's a sort of judgment call, on the fly. That's kind of an example of how my thinking goes. Even when it loses me a bit of money from for doing it, but I'm fine about that. I'd much rather get what's right. Now, one thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a little piece of tape on these whatchamacallums. In fact, where's my? Right, I'm going to poke a hole. Where's my thingies? Going to poke a hole, and I want to. It's a bit silly, but I'm just going to stick down those there wheels exactly where they are set currently. I don't want to be making adjustments to the wheels. I want them exactly where they are when I put the bridge back on, just because it saves having to get them up, find it's wrong, take them down, move it with a thumb. You know, you always have to, on a Gibson SG, you always have to slack off the thing. There is a tool you can use for lifting the bridge up, but you don't really want to be doing it under tension, so it's still going to require slacking the tension off. And once I put new strings on, I want to do that as few times as possible. Okay, one of the things that we may come across here, and I'm just going to do a check. We're going to put 9s on this, and these long device. These, just want to check what the gauge of these are. I think they're 9s. Okay. They might even be lighter. Wow. It's telling me various things. It's such a small reading. Okay, we're going to put 9s on, whatever these technically are, according to my slightly unreliable thing. Yeah, we're going to go 9s, so we will adjust for 9s when we put it on and we see what the relief is doing, if there's any change. Right, what did I say? I'm going to do a small little bit of, do a bit of smoothing over here on this nut slot. I'll just do it on the, you can't see very well, I'm going to just do it on the E saddle, and it's just with a bit of 600 grit sandpaper wrapped around the blade of a craft knife, just in case there's any rough spots in there. Let's see if we can just smooth it out a tiny bit. I'm going to do the same on the B track as well. That's that done, just to help things. So the next bit to do on the frets is there's an interesting split in the fingerboard here. There's nothing major, just to, you can see it stands out a little bit. So I'm just going to recolour the tops of these frets, and again missing out the very edges. I'm not going to the very edges because I'm building a little safety zone around the white nibs, which again they're low down on the edge of the thing, so you'd have to try hard to hit them, but it's part of the original look and aesthetic of the Gibson Les Paul, and it's what you pay your money for. So what you don't want, if at all possible, is some oaf coming along and removing them. Now that also kind of comes into play here when you get to re-crown the frets. Now I'm going to use the medium sized end of the thing, and I'm going to, more and more these days, this tool's getting older, so I'm going to keep the wire brush handy, because what I want to do is I'm going to just use the medium side of my reprofiling file, and I just want to run down excuse me, the edge of these things, and again doing my best to avoid the nibs at the end where possible. Of course it runs off and might not be entirely possible to avoid coming slightly into contact with them, but as little as possible. So I'm just looking to reshape the frets, and what we're doing here is just taking any flat spot that the process of leveling created and just taking the sharp edges off the flat spot, so that we get back in, the fret returns to a more arch shape, which is what we want when we polish it out. And this is, some folks have asked me about these StewMac files, and somebody asked for a video of somebody talking about crimson stains yesterday, crimson guitar stains, and they repeated many times throughout their video that in no way were they sponsored by or affiliated to. But then at the end they said, "Oh, come on, Crimson, I like your stuff so much, send me some free stuff, I really will use it." Anyway, I'm not affiliated in any way to StewMac, and I use this tool because although it's expensive, and you can do the same job a little more, perhaps 3 times slower, 4 times more slowly if you take your time, with a 3-sided file. This StewMac tool has served me now flawlessly for 6 years nearly, and on top of that, their stuff is expensive relatively, but it's good quality. I've never had a problem with any of their stuff, and it's they have very good, by all accounts, very good customer service. Again, not that I've ever needed to call on it. I don't think. I've never had anything go wrong, but legend has it the people, if and when they have, the StewMac people, knowing that they're selling a premium priced set of tools, they've replaced and refunded and done whatever it takes without any quibble at all, and you know, that's worth having. So I've over the 6 years, the price of this thing has absolutely paid for itself, and you know, when you do lots of setups, you don't, you know, that 4 times longer to do it with a £3 file it's an issue. It's a bonus if you know you haven't got the money, but if you've got the money for this but your time is more of an essence, then this kind of thing is a great thing to have. So you know, and then sometimes people point me to a file that's similar and half the price from another supplier, and they'll say, oh, you know, why are you paying full price for that StewMac thing when you can get this one here for this much? And you know, again, they perhaps don't see it from the side of somebody who does what I do. What would be attractive in saving £40 to introduce a note of uncertainty in terms of buying a tool that I don't know the quality of, when I've already spent twice as much and bought a tool that I have had 6 years of good service from, and I do know the quality of. And is £45 or half the price or whatever it was, is that really worth or introducing that uncertainty back into it for the sake of saving 45 quid? And actually the reality is it's not, you know. And somebody who's making that recommendation is very often not somebody in this game. You know, they're not doing this every day. So from their perspective, as somebody who might do this once every X amount of years or on their own guitars at home, saving that money might seem like a good thing to do, but the risk involved for me is just not worth it. Anyway, I'm going to go off camera now because we're into the boring section, which is I'm going to stick a load of tape on here to protect the fingerboard. I'm not really convinced. You try and buy low-tack masking tape and you get all manner of stuff. Whoever's got what, they send it. This is just a way of helping to make it low-tack by picking up a little bit of fluff. Now, the point is, don't put this on your workbench and pick up a load of iron metal shavings and push it onto your fingerboard. But if you've got a clean towel that you know you shook out this morning, then it's a good way of reducing the stickiness. Now, what I do anyway, I will do anyway, if I can't find where I've just put that thing. Oh, here it is. So I get my very sharp blade and I basically going to cut down the side. Let's see, that's so low tack it doesn't even stick on. You know what I'm going to do? This has probably got oil in it, and I'm probably making myself hiding a rod to beat my own back with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a piece of fresh new cloth, and I'm going to wipe the finger grease or any fretboard oil off this. And I'm going to put it back on, but the reason I'm going to take it off right now is because I want my, believe it or not, I want my low tack paper to stick. So I'm going to, that's marker pen and anything else that's on the fingerboard. So anyway, yeah, I want it to stick, and so removing any oil that's been put on the fingerboard at this point would have been a good move. That way I'll be able to still use low tax stuff, which is a sort of permanent insurance policy around when you're working around any finish, but it allows the low tack to stick. Okay. Right, we'll begin that process again, and I'll save you the misery, so I'll go offline and come back when this is all masked up, ready to go. Okay. Hello, back again. Right. We are, oh, yes, we're ready to put things back on. I haven't done the blob of something here because I'm not 100% sure about the positioning of these saddles on this thing, like, especially with this dropping out every 2 seconds. Talk about loose. So I'm going to need to re-intonate with the new strings on. God, it's so fiddly. I think that's the only way, and that means, what does that mean? I tell you what it means. It means, yeah, we'll check them, and then we'll have to devise a way to just put a blob of stuff on there, and we'll, if necessary, we'll put some tape underneath the the bridge at the time. Okay, so bridge on, dust off. Got to oil the fingerboard as well, don't forget, any second now, which we'll do with our trusty oil rag. Thank you. And after that, I think I'll be heading for a break in the sunshine, but we're nearly there. So very careful not to go anywhere near the nibs on this, and so I actually masked them off as well, which was probably a bit excessive, but I had a little green strip running out down either side, just covering the nibs, so in case the sandpaper went anywhere near them, it wouldn't. Okay, so next on the bench after this is one of Richard's 2 acoustics, the Chinese-made Martin copy. So I guess counterfeit is the right word, but the Chartin, as I called it, which has a pretty poor hump in the neck department, and which I've managed to solve by fret leveling the shape and hump out of it slightly, which is quite good. Okay, so stop bar, loose stop bar as well. That's the funny thing, isn't it? You'd think there'd be little clips on it to keep it in place or something. Anyway, critical. So we're going to put the new strings on, and we're going to stretch this out first, and then we're going to get it all pretty much done, and then the last thing in the whole sequence will be, oh, come on, through the hole, will be intonating and making sure the bridge components don't buzz, curse them as they do. So to string up, I'm going string through, back a whole fret. Note the bridge has fallen back, so just keep an eye on that. So the first time we go over the loose string, as it comes round, pull the loose string up, make sure the stop bar is pulled tight, and this time under the loose string, so you get a kind of locking effect. That holds the bridge in place for now, and we'll just work onwards from that. Yes, so Lovely guitar, spoiled by slight imprecision in the saddle slots, really. But that's what I like to do, chase down those little problems and try and iron them out wherever possible. So Dominic, if you're watching this years in the future, once I've got past lockdown and gone to somewhere with decent bandwidth, remember to reiterate that the tuning stability of your guitar, any guitar, it almost doesn't matter what guitar you've got, depends on getting rid of the slack in your strings, and that requires a lot more work than most of us have ever been willing to do. And in the second part, it's dependent on the quality of your nut slots and also in part the material that the nut is made from. So you get those two bits right and the guitar will stay beautifully in tune. Don't get those two bits right, and a lot of people think they'll attribute it to tuners or all kinds of things. Everybody has a pet idea and so on, which is understandable, but you can spend a lot of money chasing tuning stability right up to buying a different guitar because you think that's what you've got to do to get something that will play in tune. And it's almost entirely down to the nut slots and the slack in the strings, and you can take care of both of those, or we can take care of both of those, and for relatively little money, as in cost of a decent nut, time to make sure it's fitted correctly and that the slots are cut correctly, and then time to stretch out the strings that you fit. It's almost impossible to handle a shiny guitar without it picking up fingerprints. So pulling back a fret, holding it down, winding it on back to front upside down, over the held one. Ow, that's gone right into a wound in my thumb. Over the loose one, under the loose one as it comes round. Okay. It makes sense to have all your holes in your posts pointing in the right direction before you start. It makes things a bit easier, which I didn't. There's some people were having a discussion with me about the direction of slots on the nut on Gibson type guitars, and there's an amazing diversity of view on it, but what's really interesting is that it generates a lot of passion and heat, and people complaining about the design and saying Gibson got it so wrong and so on and so on, and then so people think nut slots that are cut in a straight line are just by default terrible because string comes through and then goes that way on the other side of it, and so on and so on. And what's true is that the Gibson headstock with the angles, the SG is a bit better, but with the Les Paul and other Gibson guitars and some Gretsch guitars where the strings go off to almost to the side, it's just not a good design. You wouldn't design a headstock like that if you wanted to have this most stable tuning possible, i.e. strings going in a straight line through the nut. And many designers figured that out early, including Leo Fender, and then later on Brian May of Queen, who built his own guitar with exactly that principle. So he made sure that strings went through the nut in a dead straight line. And there are only two headstock shapes you can do with that. One is the Fender diagonal line, 6 line, and the other one is the spear head, like the Red Special. Anyway, so people get quite aerated by it, and what they then say, some people swear that that's the right nut shape, nut style, so that the slants are cut into the nut. Some people say that's the right one, and then they argue with each other. And the truth is, neither is true. Neither is a good, neither fixes the problem. All they do is they put the site of the problem to different places. One straight one delays the problem until you get to the back edge of the nut, and then the pressure, as it turns, the string turns the corner at the back edge of the nut, and therefore the pressure is on the side of the back end of the nut. Ones where you have the slant, it changes direction there at the front edge of the nut, so all you've done is you transferred the stress to the front edge of the nut. So they're neither better or worse. But it only matters when some people blame that for being the reason the Gibson doesn't stay in tune, and it isn't the case. It will stay in tune if you get the nut slots right, and if you make sure that you've done the string stretching. Okay, so first things first, we'll get it approximately to tension. There we have approximately to tune, to pitch I should say, and now what we're going to look at is just recheck what the action is doing here. Okay, it shouldn't have changed. I haven't allowed anything to wander off. And then we check the neck relief, which is pretty flat as it was before. Okay, so I'm going to call that the same as, and I'm now going to carefully stretch the strings. Now this is really not iffy. You have to be careful with a 9 gauge string. It's all too easy to break the 9s on this process, but I'm stretching manually up and down the string using thumb and forefingers. See, I pulled a great chunk there, and that went click as it tightened up on the post. But that's part of it. There's all manner of debate. Some people believe or say, put up a spirited argument that the strings themselves can't stretch. Certainly not the plain ones, because any steel or nickel or whatever, what do they make them out of? No, that's the frets. Any steel that's stretching is by definition, its tensile strength is something or other, and then it stretches and it breaks, and therefore, unless it's actually past its breaking point, it can't be stretching. Other people say it can. And so on. So it doesn't really matter who's right and who's wrong. What's true, as we all know, is that whatever is happening, whether it's stretching or settling on the posts of the tuners or whatever it is, or into the bridge, or even that the ball end part is tightening up or whatever, we all know that there is some form of slack in the strings, and that takes a while to come out. And so a mechanical process of pulling it out is critical. And at this point we're also listening to the nut and feeling for pings, and listening and feeling for pings. We also want to feel the tuning being smooth and progressive, and I've already tested this nut for that, and I don't think it's at all bad. So it's linear. That's better than it was. Now I'm just adding a bit more stretch and blunt force. Still hear the bridge buzzing. There's one doesn't want to bend the other way. It's over the top of the hill the other way. If you're that kind of bender, this isn't going to work for you. Most people don't bend that far on these strings, but if you were, you'd have to raise the action slightly. Now you know it's incredibly low to begin with anyway, so there's room for that. But it's I'm not sure many people bend a string that far on that side. But it's it's worth knowing that you can't back bend a string that far. Right. Okay, I'm confident that that's pretty well stretched out. Okay, what I want to do now is double check the intonation one more time, and then I will go off camera and I'll do the dropping a few drops of stuff or figuring out where to put the nail polish. It's not nail varnish, it's actually cellulose thinners. No, not cellulose, cellulose, nitrocellulose. That's moving, that's the problem. Right, that's flat. Sorry, sharp, so it's too short. So we're going to push this back a little bit. Too short, right? Push it back. Okay, tiny bit. Good. Sharp. Push this one back. Push it back, push it back, push it back. Now guessing now. So I think this D now needs to come forward. That's my theory, based on what I know about the three groups of two. Too long. Yeah, it needs to come forward. That was right. See? The visual pattern was wrong and it needs fixing. Forward, bring it forward. Short neck, man. That needs to be there, which means this also needs to move, and I'm going to guess these now because they're facing the opposite direction. This one almost needs to turn round, but we'll see if we can just get it there. Stupid tunematic bridging. Sorry. Ping down there. relaxing springs, man. Sounds like a crow. Okay, guitar is done, except I will now figure out what to put on this to stop the things thinging. Alright, so thanks for watching, see you soon. Now that's not touching the back of the bridge, that's the actual string grinding from side to side in the slot, so we are going to have to try and adjust that. Now I'll have to look at that really close up and get a couple of shots, but that's not good. That's okay, that's okay, that's okay, that's okay. That one, a little tiny bit of the E and the B, but it's the B. Slightly non-standard, so it'll make this guitar a little bit non-standard, but the idea really is about the playability, or the staying in tune ability. Now this, one of the things I noticed about this guitar straight away was